Erev Tov, Rabotai. Let's continue with PIRKEH Avot. So, they're talking here about the Talmidim of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and what their teachings were. So, they mentioned something here very profound. So, what does it say here? It says that אמר להם, איזוהי דרך טובה שידבק בה אדם. So they say, right, what is a good way that a person should go, that he should cling to it? I'm sorry, it's bothering me. Sorry. Maybe you can go outside if you want to talk. Yeah, sure, yeah. That would be very nice. Okay, so, what is a good way that a person should go? That's what the rabbis are saying over here, right? So each one is giving his advice. Rabbi Eliezer says, Ein Tova. He says the best thing is the good eye. So what does that mean, good eye? It means that a person sees things, in a positive way, right? Positivity. And this is a very good thing in life, to be positive. And this way a person sees everything in a good way. Because a person who sees things and everything in a bad way, what happens is, psychologically, he becomes trapped by this, the negativity. Becomes trapped, and because of this, his whole attitude towards life becomes negative, and this is it harms him in every way. Maybe you can talk outside. Yeah, that would be very nice. That would be fantastic. So, okay. So let's continue. So that was the first one, right? Ein hara, and ein tova, right? Good eye. Next one is Rabbi Yoshua Omer, right? Chaver Tov. He says, it's good to have a good friend. Somebody who can guide you in the right way in life. A good friend. You know this, by the way, in life. You should know that a person who has good friends, he's going to have a good life in many, many ways. A person who has bad friends around him, they're going to harm him in many ways. He doesn't even understand sometimes what's going on. How much harm is coming from him with people like this, who are bad friends, because they influence you in a bad way, right? As the Chazal said, right? Oy l'rasha, oy l'shcheno. The Rasha is also oy, right? He's oy to him, right? Also, but his neighbor also, Why? Because his neighbor is hanging around with him, spending time with him, and this Rasha is racking his brains with all kinds of, bad things, telling him all kinds of bad stuff. And it happens, like this a lot of times. I see all the time, by the way. People get influenced by people who have a bad influence. And because of that, they start to think in a negative way, to act in a negative way, to do things which are reprehensible, not really respectable things, But all of a sudden, why is he doing this? Because he has a friend, who's bad, a bad friend. So therefore, having a good friend, what happens is that he influences you in a good way. What is a good friend, by the way? What does that mean, he's a good friend? What does it mean? You know what it means? He's a good guy. He's a Ben Torah. He's honest, right? Chesney, He has a good heart.
He gives good advice.
Yeah, good advice, of course. Yeah, good advice and all these things, And he goes a straight way in life, And if he goes straight, and you're his friend, he's also going to help you to go straight, I remember one time I was here, honestly, I don't want to say his name. I don't even know what his name is, but there was one guy here, I was walking out of the shul. I think it was Erev Shabbat. We just did Arvit, And he comes to me and he says, I can make you, tells me, I can make you some money, We have to do some, let's do a little bit fraud, a little bit something, I can do some things, and get you some money, in a fraudulent way. You know what I mean? So I'm looking at this guy like, listen, you're talking to a rabbi, don't you have any respect for yourself? You're coming to a rabbi and asking him to do fraud? You know what I mean? Like, where's your head, Where are you? I mean, you don't have any respect for yourself. You don't have any respect for Hashem. You don't have any respect for any rabbis. Nothing. This is a bad friend. A person who doesn't know how to, behave properly, wants to influence you. And he wouldn't give up, I told him, I said, please, don't insult me, by telling me these things. He says, oh no, he tells me, you're foolish, because you don't do these things. I'm looking at him like, excuse me, what are you talking about? If you don't do fraud, you're a fool. That's what he's telling you, this guy, you understand? What a terrible, way to live life like this.
From family coming out.
I'm sorry.
From family.
I don't know. It's family. I don't know what it is. You know what I mean? But some people think, to do fraud, it's like a mitzvah. You know what I mean? They think it's a mitzvah to do fraud. To cheat somebody, to get some money from them. Whoever it may be, I don't know who it is. Whoever, it doesn't really matter, What difference does that make? You have to be smart, You got to be clever. Make some money, do some fraud. No, this is a bad friend, right? This is a friend that you don't need. That's exactly what it's telling you, right? If you want to pick the good way in life, number 1, good eye. Look at things with a good eye. Number 2, good friends. Right? And they say, right, all the ones who are bad friends, stay away from them. Don't speak with them. Don't call them on the phone. Don't text them, Don't do nothing with them. You don't want to have any kind of contact with people like this. Okay, that's pretty much what we're saying, right? That's number 2. Okay, great. So let's move on. So then he says, Shachen Tov, right, which is the same thing, right, Rabbi Yosef. Good neighbor. Right, so right, that having a good neighbor is a very important thing. You know why that is, right? Because when it comes to, time of trouble, time of distress, he's the one you can really rely on, the guy next to you. You know what I mean? You need something, you're in trouble, you got an issue going on. Who do you go to? Your next door neighbor. Tuk, 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 tuk. Hi. I got a problem. Can you help me? Please, get me out of this issue. If you got a good neighbor with a good heart, sometimes, by the way, it could be even a goy. Doesn't matter. Sometimes a goy also has a good heart. He'll help you because he's your neighbor. It can be anybody. It doesn't matter who it is. But if you got a good neighbor, who can stand for you when you need something, some help, this is a very, very important thing. So again, right, same thing. The same idea, very close to what we just said before. Okay, very good. So then Rabbi Shimon says, another good quality, haroet hanolad. Right? So this is also important to know. What does this mean, haroet hanolad? This is what the Chachamim say, right? Ezeu chacham, haroet hanolad. Who is considered to be chacham? The one who sees the nolad. What is nolad? He sees the eventuality of what's going to happen. If I do this, it's going to lead to that. If it's going to lead to this, then it's going to lead to that. He knows the eventuality, right, of what one thing leads to another. We call that, in English, the domino effect. If you kill this domino, it's going to kill this domino, right, and it's going to knock down this domino. You have to know what dominoes your actions are going to knock down. This is a very important thing. And if you don't have this kind of a mind, you're not so analytical like this, you're not so clever. So what happens is you don't think, what is this going to lead to, and you can get to big trouble. You know what I mean? You don't think what leads to what. Just say, yeah, I'm going to do it, I don't care, I'll do it. But you don't think, where is this going to go? Where is this going to roll down to, So that's the thing, So a Chacham knows how to see what his acts and also what his words are going to effectuate also, Sometimes also this happens. That a person, speaks very rough to people. Sometimes, just he's in a bad mood. You know what I mean? He just had a bad day or something, People are getting on his case, he's having a hard time that day. You know what I mean? His wife started fighting with him. This happens, right? Right? Sometimes his wife gets on his case. Sometimes his children, everything, right? Or his boss, right? Whatever, his coworkers. So what happens is he's in a bad mood now. If you come to him now, right, and try to say something to him, he's going to talk rough with you, and you're going to think, oh my God, what does this guy want from me? I just told him something, and he's jumping on me like a lion, trying to knock me down, but it's not that. It's just that, he's in a bad mood, that's what it's all about, So a person has to think, when you tell people something to somebody, don't speak too rough with them, because you're going to trigger something there, and it's going to kindle a fire. And he's going to jump back at you, He's going to bite you back because he thinks you're biting him. You know what I mean? By talking this way. So I'll tell you something, I've seen so many times that smart chachamim, smart rabbis, what they know how to do, one thing is they know how to speak nice to people, in a sweet way. And because of that, the person responds in a positive way. He gives you a positive response. It's like a mirror, they say the Chazal, right? Whatever you do in the mirror, it's doing back to you. You know what I mean? So if you speak nice to people and speak nice words with them, and don't be a wise guy, you know? Some people like to be a wise guy. You know what I mean? What does that mean? They like to talk sharp to people, you know? Like putting them down, you know? Sharp words. Why do you have to be so sharp with people? Why are you so nasty? You know, why? What's the purpose of that, you know? Just be kind, you know, be sweet, you know? Like honey, you know, like candy, you know? Talk sweet. Let sweet things come out of your mouth. Why nasty things? Why sour things all the time? You know, no good. This is no good, you know? So that's the thing. That a person who knows how to see the nolad, what's going to lead to what, he does things in a way, you know, which he's going to be protected because he's doing everything, you know, in a clever way. That he knows how to prevent problems, you know, before he starts them. You know, that's the thing, right? Very important stuff over here, this stuff, I have to tell you. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so then there's one more over here. Right, Rabbi Eliezer says, Lev Tov, right? So he says the best thing, you know what it is, positive in life? To have a good heart. You know this, by the way, you know? We all know this. And, you know, I have to say, you know, one thing I have to say for us, you know, the Sephardi people, you know, the Jews, you know, we have a good heart, you know, in general, you know, we're good-hearted people. So, you know, we're kind, you know, and all the Jewish people are like that, the truth is, you know, but we especially, we're good-hearted people. We like to help each other, you know, we like to stand for each other, you know, we're positive, you know, we have a positive attitude with a good heart. And this is a very important thing, because when you have a good heart, you're doing everything, you know, for the right purpose, you know, for the right goals, you know, and it affects everything that you do in your life when you have a good heart, you know. But when you have a dirty heart, you know, you're always looking to put people down, you know, and try to get them to crash, you know, negative, everything, you know. You know, I want this guy to fail, you know, I want him to fall down, you know, I want him to fall, you know. A bad heart, you know, no good, Lev no good, you know. This is no good. What can you do? Everybody's different, you know. I'll tell you, I spoke about this before one time. I don't know if it was here or somewhere else, but there was, you know, one rabbi, you know, in the neighborhood over here, and he was quoting some, you know, Rosh Yeshiva, whatever, that was written in some kind of pamphlet, you know, about him. So, you know, they asked him one time, this Rosh Yeshiva, you know, to be sandak, you know, at a Brit Milah. You know, this is very common, right? They bring like a big chacham to be sandak, you know, at a Brit Milah, because it makes a tikkun of blood. So what happens is that this rabbi, you know, this Rosh Yeshiva, he says, I don't want to be sandak, I'm not going, you know. So they asked him, why not, Rabbi? What's wrong? You don't want to go to be sandak? So he says, you know, when you go to be sandak at the Brit Milah, who are you meeting over there? Eliyahu Navi, right? Because Eliyahu Navi has to come, you know, to all the Britot. You know, right? We have Kisei Eliyahu, right? Because he comes to every Brit. But he says, when you're learning Torah, you're with Hashem. You know? So what's better, to be with Eliyahu or to be with Hashem? So he says, Hashem is better. That's what he tells them, you know? So I tell people, you know, this is shtut, you know what he said? Nonsense. I mean, what kind of thing is that? Why? Because the reason why you're going to the Brit Milah is because you want to make tikkun. You want to make the tikkun for the vlad, to give him a good influence. You're a big chacham. You want to influence him in the right way. So this is what you're doing it for. You're making kal vachomer, Hashem, Eliyahu. What difference does that make? What are you learning? What are you studying Torah for? If you're not going to do mitzvot, you know, chesed, to give tikkun to the vlad, what kind of rabbi are you? What kind of Rosh Yeshiva are you? What kind of tzaddik are you? You know what's the problem? The problem is lev tov, no lev tov, lev ra, bad heart. You know, doesn't have a good heart. This guy. You know what I mean? If he was a good-hearted person, he would never refuse. You know, Maran, remember, you know, he never refused to be sandak for anybody. Sometimes you'll tell them, you know, you got to come to me because I'm old already. I'm 90 years old. I'm not going to come to you. You got to come to me. Bring me your kid. I'll be your sandak over here in my house. No problem, you know. But nevertheless, he never refused. You know, or Rav Chaim Kanievsky also. You know, anybody who would ask him, you know, to be sandak, he would go and be sandak, even though he has to close the Gemara, you know, for half hour, 2 hours, whatever it is. You know, he has to close the Gemara. He's going to stop learning and go do chesed. You know why? Because he has lev tov. But a person who has lev ra, he doesn't want to do nothing for nobody, you know, just me, myself, and I, you know, only thinks about himself. No good, you know, a person like this. I'm sorry, Nechila, what did you want to say?
I'm saying in Torah says, if I would bring it, mitzvah.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Yeah, it's a mitzvah, but, you know, sometimes, the thing is, you know, you have two mitzvot, right? You have Talmud Torah, you know, and you have Brit Milah. Which one is greater, you know? But to be sandak, you know, it's a chesed, you know, you're doing a chesed for somebody. So you can't, nobody else can do that but you. You know, so you got to go. You're a big chacham. You got to do it. You're the one who's supposed to do that. That's the whole thing, you know. So comes, right, and at the end, after all these rabbis expressed their opinion, so he says like this, right? Amar lahem, ro'eh ani et divrei Rabbi Elazar ben Arach midivrechem shebichlal devarav divrechem. So he says, you know what? He says, what Rabbi Elazar ben Arach said, Lev Tov, that's more important than all the other ones we mentioned. Oh, it's greater than all the other ones. Why? So he says, because if you have Lev Tov, you got everything. You have all those qualities. Understand? If you have a good heart, your heart is in the right place, you got everything. You know? So that overpowers and supersedes everything when you got Lev Tov. You know? So that's the most important thing, you know? With all these qualities, even though they're all good, but Lev Tov is the number one. You know? What does that mean? Have a clean heart, you know? You should want good for your fellow Jew. Want good for him. Not to destroy him, not to put him down, right? Not to trick him, you know? Not to deceive him. This person like this doesn't have a Lev Tov, you know? He doesn't care. He only cares about himself. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen. רבי חנינא בן קשיא אומר, רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא לעזוב את ישראל, לפיכך חיבה להם תורה ומצוות שאינם חפץ, למען צדקו ידיר תורה וידיר.